you. We want, before we open up to the audience, in case you guys have any burning questions, just if we go down the line and if you could share some practical things that we can take away from today to, so that we can help bolster the movement, join the movement, grow the movement, and create the world that we know is possible.
Okay, so what we're really working on right now is that we're trying to build the wider food movement and the food justice movement here in the UK as Land Workers Alliance, because we're farmers, and I pointed out to somebody before that the UK was actually one of the first industrialised countries to actually dispossess peasants from the land, and so actually there's not so many small-scale farmers here, but there's a lot of people who eat, and we need the solidarity of everybody that actually wants a better food system to join with us. And so we have a supporter member category for people to join the Land Workers Alliance as a supporter member, and you can find out about our campaigns that we're running, and they really work. And the one we're running right now, if you look up the website amendagbill.uk, like amend the agriculture bill, amendagbill.uk.
We can share all of these
links. It's one of these things. We just ran out of money for the thing that says, it's actually to the MP, write your letter, postcode, blah, blah, blah thing, but actually we're going to renew it because somebody donated them out to put it back up again. Right, we've had about 4,000 people write in to put agroecology into the new agriculture bill, and that's really had an impact, and I want you to know just how concrete that's been, because all of these meetings I'm having with people in Westminster, and all these things have all come off of the back of them getting a letter from somebody who's written to them saying, I know my local farm, I want good food, I want agroecology for all the different reasons. We have loads of members of Extinction Rebellion and other organisations that are also doing loads of direct action, writing and targeting, and they might fill up the public gallery doing the agriculture bill debates, right? We've got all levels of different stuff. We had a load of people all march across Westminster, and we had tractors and everybody going across, about better food and farming, about agroecology and the food bill. Stuff like that. We need people to join in. So if you join our supporter member category, you find out about those things. But do write to your MP about getting agroecology into the bill. And I'll tell you, this meeting I was at the day before yesterday with just some civil servants in DEFRA, off the back of some of these other meetings. I brought out my little leaflets and I had it under my little stack of papers or whatever, and I kind of moved some over, and this lady beside me was like, "Oh, are you the lady that's behind all these people talking about agroecology at the moment in government?" And I was like, "Yeah." And she was like, "Wow, loads of people, all the meetings we're going to, people are going, people are really making a fuss of this agroecology thing." And it was just so nice to hear that it's actually trickling through in places we're not hearing from. I'm not saying that's totally going to transform things, but it's one step along the way. If we keep pushing and we keep going along that path and then throwing more practical things they can do into their path, that social awareness rising to a certain level will be that critical turning point. So, you might think it's collectivism or whatever to do these things, but actually it has an impact if people use that well, so please do it.
I always say that it is always important to organize, mobilize other people, organize ourselves, educate ourselves, do political education, do all these kind of discussions and build alliances. Because those are the 4 steps that must be done together and build a movement. Big changes happen not because government officials just woke up one day and thought, oh, this is a good thing to do, so I will legislate it. No, most of the good things that we know now, that we benefit from now, were fought for in the streets, in the fields. So in the Philippines, we have this saying, everything that is now a law came from the parliament of the streets. Everything, before they come to the negotiating table, it was first fought in the street. It was first pushed by people who are normally not invited in the table. So the policy is actually the last part. Okay, I'm a policy person, but I'm saying this. But it is always important that anything that we will push as policy comes from a movement. So there should be people outside and people inside, and sometimes cross. Those people in the outside also know how to be in the inside, and those in the inside know how to organize in the outside. We've done this in so many times, this inside-outside strategy, and it always works. On climate, we have no time, we don't have the luxury of time. We have to move right and correctly. Because there's a lot of false solutions out there. So we have to be very, very discerning as well, what are the right and appropriate solutions. And then maybe lastly, I would also say that when it comes to those solutions, most of the solutions are small scale. We should not also look at things like one size fits all. We have to look at, some strategy may not have to be the same. But what is needed by specific people, community, then we should do that. But in some policies, it could be global, it could be multilateral. And at the same time, forgetting one thing that I think it's important but I can't remember. I think it's on that aspect of we need to, before we come up with the alternatives, we have to deconstruct. We have to deconstruct what we understand, what we know, what is the normal, before we can reconstruct. So that activity of deconstruction happens before we reconstruct. Thank you.
I'm going to keep it simple and say, take away one message. I think it's one of positivism. I think it's you're important. I think these events are important, genuinely. I think it's really good. And be heard. Be heard. You care. You're here. You're interested. Be heard. Make sure that your voice, your individual voice is heard. And as well as looking at the government entities that we have and letting them know what you believe and what you think, talk to the corporate entities, because more often than not, those are the people that are actually running the countries that we're talking about, running the issues that we're talking about. Let them know no more. Stand up. Shame them, stand up and take away the profit and give it to good.
I just jotted down a wee list, some of which I'm hopelessly failing on myself, so it's a good take home for me too. I think joining a local Extinction Rebellion group is a positive thing. Also, a local anti-fracking group, because even if it isn't affecting you, the danger is it might do, and it is literally sprinting in the wrong direction. And also they are more often than not very vibrant, very interesting groups that have a lot to do with important issues like climate change. So I think those two things would be really good. Also, taking to the streets, the non-violent direct action trainings, for example, Extinction Rebellion goes on, anti-fracking groups do the same. I think that's a really, really important thing. I think people on the streets make a difference. So I think that sort of training, there's non-violent direct action boot camps, for example, that some groups put on. I've heard very, very good things about that, very practical but very important. I also think that supporting the kids' strikes would be a really, really good thing to do. I'm certainly going to try and do it in my local community. I think it got a lot of attention very quickly. So I think that's something I think we should all support. And then also, I haven't mentioned it, but we did this in the last talk that we did, but there's a campaign for ending ecocide on Earth, which is a campaign to make ecocide an international crime alongside genocide. Okay, it only takes one state to push this forward. At the moment, they're at the stage where they're trying to get a state to back the idea, and then it can go as a tabled amendment to the Rome Statute. So it's possible. I'm not saying it's likely, but the more people that get involved, the better. Yeah, basically, ecocide is essentially the environmental version of genocide, right? It's about destruction of ecosystems. So it's about making that a criminal activity. So it's way beyond regulation of corporations. It's looking at making something like those pictures I showed you of the tar sands an illegal activity, right? So obviously it would receive an awful lot of resistance, but I think the end goal of making it a crime isn't necessarily what it's all about. It's about making the idea important and seeing these things as criminal, even if the law doesn't recognise them as such. So I put quite a bit of time into this movement. I don't necessarily think it's going to happen in the time frame that we need it to, but a lot of attention, I think, is paid to people who are making these campaign ideas public. I think Polly Higgins is someone you could look up on YouTube. She's done lots of really, really good talks, but it's gone beyond her work now. But it's a fantastic initiative. So it's End Ecocide on Earth, and it's a major campaign. And it was also worked its way through the EU system, and they had something like 200,000 signatures to try and push it through the EU side of things as well. But it's a very, very interesting campaign and well worth supporting. And then finally, I think I just ended up buy less stuff.
Yeah, you already spoke about the children's strike, which was high on my list. There's plenty. I mean, I think young people have been leading the way in the last few years. So with the divestment movement, for example, so asking to divest, universities to divest from fossil fuels, and so from university this movement has spread to banks and insurers, and it's a very powerful message that people are sending. That basically money needs to move away from these polluting companies and so on. But also, I mean, I think I wanted to attract your attention to the fact that next year, in 2020, all countries who have ratified the Paris Agreement need to present national mitigation plans, so national plans on how they're going to address climate change. And the current plans they submitted a few years ago are utterly inadequate, because they're still going to bring us to 3 degrees global warming or even more. So while we all know that we need to keep it to maximum 1.5. So we really need a movement across countries that really pushes countries to adopt very ambitious measures by 2020, and then to implement those measures. So I think, but also, so it's important to participate in those movements that will be set up, I hope, very soon, to demand this increased ambition at national level. But it's also important to demand participation in the decision making, because only plans that are adopted by consulting people and by taking into account people's views are then those who are supported by the people, and then those who get to be implemented. Otherwise, we do like in France with the, what is called the tax on, the carbon tax that was massively criticized. While it could be an important measure, but only if it is properly conceived and discussed with people, and taking into account all considerations, for example, with people of lower income and so on.
Well, I think virtually it's one of the advantages of being the last speaker that, well, actually all your points are covered. But I think one of the things I'd say, particularly in relation to the divestment, is to look at past movements and look at history and see how battles were won in the past, because that's a great way of planning one's strategy and understanding what works. And when you think of what the Mahatma Gandhi did, or Mandela did, or Martin Luther King's civil rights movements, when they began, it must have felt pretty hopeless, that actually you would probably die before anything happened. And there was, the occasional person who said, well, let me lose my life, I don't care, I'm so distraught by this that I'm just going to take a chance. However, if you then delve into the sorts of things that worked, because it became a massive, social movement, I draw on the apartheid era, and how students made such a difference by saying, for example, this bank is still in liaising with and linked with the apartheid regime. So we're going to pull out all our money and hassle the equivalents of UCAS and people like that, and say we want our student loans placed in another bank. And it is said that F.W. de Klerk, when he saw that happening, and people just using their purchase power, and so you didn't need to get yourself arrested, you didn't have to do anything. Just do things like that. And if enough people do it, then the politicians get the message, because the tipping point has been reached. And I think that's where this business of starting with the fossil fuel disinvestment is a very good idea. So You know, some students might say, well, you know, I don't have that kind of money. But talk to your parents about it, talk to your families, talk to the organizations you work for. See if they are invested, and you may find that inadvertently they may be, and they haven't even thought about it. And I was extremely proud when the British Medical Association completely divested itself of fossil fuels. And it's a growing number, starting with the Rockefeller Foundation and so on, that publicly declared they were clean from that point of view. And so there are, and as Damien said, purchase less. I now make a point of buying no vegetables at my local Waitrose and so on. I do not want, except the ones that don't come in plastic wrapping. It takes a little bit of extra effort to go to the farmer's market, but I do that, or, you know, my husband goes, we have a little rota, and somebody goes and does that. Because, you know, it's a side issue, it's the plastic issue. I've just thought I am no longer going to buy vegetables, and even if it means I have to deny myself some exotic vegetables which will only ever come in plastic wrapping for a while at least, you know, so be it. It isn't as if there aren't other vegetables you could buy. So using your purchase power, getting families to use their purchase power is a very good way of all of us beginning to rattle, I suppose, the big supermarkets and people like that. And I think, you know, just to, and things begin to work. You just feel you're a lone voice, often regarded as the troublemaker. And I just wanted to mention to you, ages ago, it must have been more than 20 years ago, when I started thinking about these things, I also discovered that when you look at at that time, the NHS policy for reimbursing travel money. So if you had to go from a hospital to a distant clinic to run a clinic in, let's say, a village, they used to pay you for the 20 miles, you know, that you had to cover to go to the clinic and back to your base hospital. And of course, the typical way they would do things is if you were a senior doctor driving around in your posh gas-guzzling car, you got more pounds per mile you traveled than the little junior doctor who might travel around in a little banger, you know, just a liter or something. And I can remember writing to the top finance people who I didn't know at the time, and say, could you please turn it around? It ought to be the other way around. And actually getting an incredibly frosty response. But the wonderful thing is, it's now changed. And the one, they probably think they did it, that they thought about it. And that's okay. That's the art of being, you know, sort of a civil servant, or, you know, a kind of doer, where you let them take the credit. It's fine, as long as it gets done. But, you know, now it would be regarded as madness to do it the other way around. But things begin to change if we keep on. And yes, and I think it's a very good idea to join these schools movements. I was so heartened. I'm a Guardian reader, by the way, the only national newspaper that reports, you know, faithfully on climate issues all the time. So it's very sad, because you then don't quite get an understanding of what's happening to readers of other newspapers. But teachers have now taken up the movement,
I think
and they want.
The next student march is on the 15th of March.
Yeah.
Which will be
But teachers have said this should get in the curriculum.
Yeah.
So that's great. It's all beginning to happen. And just an irony with racism and farming and all that, John and Josie. You know, I'm the other Indian origin person who keeps talking at every convention I go to about climate change and health, about how this country has a very proud agrarian heritage and has lost it completely, because, you know, when the Icelandic, do you remember the ash cloud that was hanging on? One further week, I do know this, one further week and we'd have run out of fruit and vegetables in this country altogether. You know, and thank heavens the ash cloud lifted and they could start importing fruit and vegetables. That is how close we are to having empty shelves like some other countries, you know, where you may not get food at all this month, or no bread on the shelves. We don't know that, and I think it was Stephen who was talking about how we feel cushioned and sheltered, and surely this is not going to happen yet. We were that close. Maybe it would have been another tipping point. I keep waiting for those tipping points. I don't know what they'd be. But yeah, could be. But yeah, so there are ways by which we could encourage ourselves. But the key to this is, I think, looking historically at what happens, do what we can within our spheres of influence, and there's heaps we can do, and join forces with each other.